Good evening, you are watching Green News in English. I'm Sona Tumanyan. From the unresolved issue of Armenian prisoners of war to Donald Trump's triumphant appearance in Northern Korea, here is a brief look at this week's top stories. When will Aliyev and Erdogan visit Yerevan? Armenia's foreign minister comments. The national interest writes, if Pashinyan enters, he will lead Armenia to a long-awaited peace era. Work on prisoners of war continues, but is the fate of displaced Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians still up in the air? EuroNest in Yerevan, Azerbaijan and Georgia boycott the summit. The Pashinyan-Macron meeting in Paris, peace is on the agenda once again. To begin with, if you have ever stood in the Vatican, you have surely felt that dizzying rush of emotion inside the Sistine Chapel. On this day, November 1st, 1512, the world first laid eyes on what would become a monumental cultural legacy, the Bible painted across the ceiling. The commission came in 1508 from the ambitious Pope Julius II, but it was a project Michelangelo never wanted. He was a sculptor passionate about carving the Pope's magnificent tomb. Instead, he was ordered to paint a task he felt was a setup for failure. What followed was 4 years of monumental struggle. Though he designed his own ingenious scaffolding, the work was agonizing. For hours on end, he stood with his head craned back, a torment he captured perfectly in a poem. My bird turns up to heaven, my nape falls in, my brush above me all the time dribbles paint to my face makes a fine floor for droppings. And now, back to ordinary political newscasts. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan announced that his country is lifting transit restrictions for Azerbaijan and is ready to immediately facilitate truck traffic from Turkey, a move he described as a major step toward breaking a decades-long regional blockade. The announcement came as the National Assembly began preliminary discussions on the 2026 state budget, attended by the Prime Minister and his cabinet. Pashinyan declared that for the first time in Armenia's history, the budget is being discussed under conditions of established peace. He pointed to the Washington Declaration and the period of 1 year and 8 months without casualties on the border as evidence. As a practical sign of this peace, Pashinyan welcomed Azerbaijan's recent statement that it would lift restrictions on goods transiting to Armenia. This is the first phase in overcoming Armenia's blockade, as stated. In a reciprocal move, Pashinyan said Armenia would also remove its transit limitations.
Starting today, we are ready to ensure the transit of trucks from Turkey to Azerbaijan and in the opposite direction, along the Margara, Yegnadzor, Sisian, Goris route.
The Prime Minister also spoke about Trump's trip project, confirming it is in an active implementation phase with intensive work on the way with the United States. While acknowledging its complexity, he expressed confidence that solutions would be found quickly. Pashinyan cited the Washington Declaration as the legal basis for the project, referencing clauses that ensure unimpeded communication with mutual benefits between Azerbaijan and its exclave of Nakhichevan through Armenian territory. He also highlighted Armenia's commitment to work with the U.S. and third parties to define the project scope and implement it as quickly as possible. What is the price of peace in Caucasus? If you don't have the answer to this question, the National Interest has a new article with this title. Let me quote the beginning. Armenia's Prime Minister has diligently worked for peace and integration in the Caucasus despite withering domestic criticism. In the article, author Joseph Epstein calls Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's political career noteworthy. Epstein argues that if Pashinyan enters, he could lead Armenia into a long-awaited era of peace. However, if he is defeated, the country risks turning to Moscow's orbit, much like neighboring Georgia, and the conflict in the South Caucasus could reignite. The author recalls U.S. President Donald Trump praising Pashinyan's courage at the August 8 peace summit in Washington. Epstein believes the United States can help Pashinyan prove that his policies bring tangible benefits. He suggests that strategic investments in Armenia's Crossroads of Peace initiative and its burgeoning artificial intelligence sector could boost the economy, create jobs, and strengthen Armenia's role as a key transit hub. By the way, Armenia has extended a verbal invitation to the leaders of Turkey and Azerbaijan to attend the 8th European Political Community Summit, which will be held in Yerevan in 2026. The country's Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan made the announcement while speaking to reporters at the National Assembly. He clarified that the invitation is currently informal and that there has been no opportunity yet to discuss the specifics of a potential visit by President Ilham Aliyev and Recep Tayyip Erdogan. When asked about the public's readiness for such a historic visit, Mirzoyan emphasized the new reality of peace in the region. The 8th summit of the European Political Community is scheduled to be held in Armenia on May 4, 2026.
The leaders of our two countries are now unequivocally saying that peace has been established. We have peace and our goal is set. To take good neighborly steps, Mirzoyan stated. One day, I'm not saying it's today, we will be ready to see President Aliyev in Yerevan, and conversely, Prime Minister Pashinyan in Baku. I am saying that this situation will happen one day. What we can say today is that we must follow this path.
While there has been no official response to the invitation, several Azerbaijani media outlets are reporting that relations have not yet reached a stage for President Aliyev to visit Armenia in May. Amid new allegations of torture from former Nagorno-Karabakh leaders on trial in Baku, Armenia's foreign minister has addressed the issue of prisoners head-on, calling their continued detention a major obstacle to lasting peace. Speaking at the National Assembly, Ararat Mirzoyan stated that the release of hostages held in Baku remains a critical, unresolved humanitarian issue, alongside clarifying the fate of those still considered missing. He described the deep-seated animosity as an objective scar of the conflict, fueled by a history of enmity that creates significant mistrust between the two societies. While acknowledging these severe challenges, Mirzoyan reaffirmed his government's commitment to pursuing a step-by-step resolution of all outstanding issues, stressing the goal of creating a peaceful and cooperative atmosphere in the region.
An opposition-led initiative at the EuroNest Parliamentary Assembly, which called for ensuring the right to return for forcibly displaced Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh and the release of prisoners, has been defeated. The measure failed after ruling party deputies abstained from the vote, according to MP Yerevan, who argued that the issue of return is not on the current agenda and could provoke a new conflict.
The initiative called to compel Azerbaijan to immediately release prisoners of war and other detained persons, and to guarantee the safe return of forcibly displaced persons from Nagorno-Karabakh to their homeland. Armenia, the Armenian government, the officials responsible for Armenia's foreign policy are not presenting such a demand to Azerbaijan at this moment.
According to opposition MP Artur Kachatran, the initiative required 6 signatures to be put to a vote. They had secured 2 from the European Parliament, and others had expressed willingness to sign. But then, he says, the plan was thwarted internally.
And then, a few minutes before the vote, they started writing to me, saying, you know, your government, the ruling party MPs, are taking steps to ensure this amendment does not pass. Now, what does that mean? It means these authorities have not only reconciled with ethnic cleansing, but are also prohibiting the people of Artsakh from returning to their homes. What does it mean if an Artsakh native wants to return and they say, no, we are not raising that issue?
Yerevan countered that, with a peace process underway, such a demand is unrealistic. He argued that if Azerbaijan made a similar demand of Armenia involving international forces, it would rightly be perceived as a path to conflict.
It is not realistic to demand such a thing now, especially under the control or protection of international forces. You understand, don't you? In simpler terms, this translates to some kind of peacekeeping mission, right? We all understand. They understand. You understand. I understand that this is unrealistic. And even if we imagine such a thing could theoretically be discussed, we are not raising such an issue now. If they said the same to us, you would perceive it as a conflict, and you would be right. Of course. What are you telling that state? You're saying, I demand you bring international forces into your country's territory. Isn't that a conflict?
Kachatran argued that Armenia must not submit to Azerbaijan's agenda and should use every available platform to defend the legal rights of Armenians.
all structures in their entirety must increase the pressure on Azerbaijan. They can do it. EuroNest on one side, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly on another, the European Parliament on another, PACE on another, other structures on another, so that Azerbaijan finally ensures the return of the Armenians it ethnically cleansed to their homeland. This is the reality. But even if it were possible, we will not continue the conflict. That opportunity you speak of, you mean an opportunity for conflict. That's what it comes down to. An opportunity for conflict. No, we do not want that.
Since the prisoner release was part of the same failed package, Khachatryan questioned why the ruling party didn't propose separating the issues to at least allow a vote in favor of the captives. For more than 2 years, the former military political leaders of Nagorno-Karabakh and other Armenian captives have been held in Azerbaijani prisons. Azerbaijani media periodically release fragmented photos and videos from their court hearings.
There are 3 levels of work. There is political work, legal work, and media and public relations work to keep this issue, especially the issue of the hostages, visible. It must be in the international press, which is more difficult. It must be in the Armenian press. It must be in the public consciousness that this issue is not solved. Today, they are our brothers. They must come home, and we must try with all our strength to bring them here to freedom.
Baku continues to pressure more than 20 Armenian prisoners with various accusations, and since September of this year, they have been held without monitoring by the Red Cross. Jonathan Spongenberg believes a tailored approach is needed for each individual.
The most important thing is political pressure, because today we can say that we have an opportunity through Trump to bring real pressure to bear.
Meanwhile, detained former state minister Ruben Vardanyan has a new lawyer after dismissing his previous one due to overall dissatisfaction with the legal proceedings. The Armenian government maintains that it is working on the return of the prisoners, but will not make public statements until there are concrete results. Simeon Hovhannisyan, Diana Karapetyan, and Gevorg Sianosyan. ReOpen Media.
Armenia's Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan has affirmed the country's strong ties with Iran, dismissing any speculation of a strained relationship. Despite numerous speculations and hypotheses, we have excellent relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran and we're in almost daily contact, Mirzoyan announced during a joint session of parliamentary standing committees. The foreign minister added that Armenia and Iran have already declared their relationship to be strategic, a partnership that he said will be reflected in official documents. Continuing the news on Armenia's foreign policy, in October 28, senior Armenian officials held separate meetings with a high-level European Union delegation to discuss deepening ties. Deputy Foreign Minister Vahan Kostanyan met with the delegation co-led by officials from the EU's External Action Service and the European Commission, according to the Foreign Ministry. The sides exchanged views on the bilateral agenda, welcoming the conclusion of negotiations on the new Armenia-EU partnership agenda and discussing the timeline for its final adoption. By the way, on the same day, Secretary of the Security Council Armen Grigoryan also hosted the EU officials. At the delegation's request, Grigoryan presented the details of the August 8 Washington Declaration, the economic opportunities from unblocking regional transport links, and the latest developments in the Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process. Both sides underscored the importance of implementing mutually beneficial projects to boost economic connectivity, noting that such initiatives are reinforced by the established peace and the agreements reached in Washington. And the culmination of Armenia-Europe foreign policy dialogue, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's high-profile visit to Paris. In Paris for the Peace Forum, the Prime Minister framed the upcoming parliamentary elections as a critical moment for the entire peace process. His agenda was packed with key meetings, including with French President Macron and the EU Special Representative, who notably told Pashinyan that the EU highly values Armenia's human rights reforms. The Prime Minister also held talks with the President of Moldova and later joined other heads of state for an official dinner at the Elysee Palace, hosted by President Emmanuel Macron himself. But of course, the centerpiece of the visit was the one-on-one meeting between Pashinyan and Macron. So now, from the City of Love, let's wrap up this two-day visit with a report on that very political dialogue.
The 2026 elections are critical for peace, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan declared in France, once again advancing his thesis that Armenian citizens will be choosing between peace and war. Speaking at the 8th Paris Peace Forum, the Prime Minister described the established peace with Azerbaijan as a historic change.
We have peace, and that is a reality. This is a historic change, not only in our bilateral relations with Azerbaijan, but also for our region as a whole.
Countering frequent criticism that the Trump-Way transport project only benefits Azerbaijan, Pashinyan argued that the initiative is important for Armenia as well. He also expressed hope for positive developments in the normalization process with Turkey.
I believe we are reaching a point where we will have full diplomatic relations, open borders, and economic and political cooperation.
Pashinyan also addressed Azerbaijan's demand for Armenia to change its constitution. He stated that in 2024, Armenia's constitutional court had already ruled that the constitution contains no territorial claims against any neighbor. He added that the text of the peace agreement itself contains numerous provisions confirming that neither side has territorial claims against the other, and that they commit not to make such claims in the future.
To close and resolve all these topics, it is simply necessary to sign and ratify the peace treaty. After that, it will acquire the highest legal force, and there will be no occasion for other interpretations.
During his visit, Pashinyan discussed regional issues with French President Emmanuel Macron. According to a government statement, Macron once again congratulated him on the establishment of peace with Azerbaijan and stressed France's unconditional support for Armenia's sovereignty and the strengthening of peace. While at the forum, Pashinyan also met with Moldovan President Maia Sandu and the President of the Belgian Chamber of Representatives before attending an official dinner at the Élysée Palace. This year's Paris Peace Forum brought together leaders from about 30 countries to discuss global peace and cooperation. But what is the practical impact of such forums? According to international relations expert Grigor Balasanyan, they are largely symbolic events that solve no major issues, and worse, are sometimes immediately followed by military action, citing the Sharm el-Sheikh peace conference held just 2 weeks before the Gaza conflict intensified.
It happened that way in Gaza, and naturally, the same thing happens at other conferences. It's just the accepted format where everyone has to speak with a pleasant face about the importance of peace, so that people no longer die. But in real life, the policies they pursue lead to new, more numerous victims around the world every day.
As for why peace is being discussed so intensely now, Balasanyan believes the term is being used to push forward mega projects that have been impossible to implement for centuries.
We are talking about the so-called Trump Highway in our region and in other regions as well. Now this is presented as a step that will bring peace, and this rhetoric and the word peace are essentially acceptable to the local peoples, and they no longer think about the consequences that could result from implementing these projects.
According to the expert, every party expects something different from this peace. Pashinyan wants votes in the 2026 elections, Azerbaijan and Turkey want their desired transport route, and Trump wants a big deal, business interests, and a Nobel Peace Prize. Mary Danielian, ReOpen Media.
Let me add that before leaving for a working visit to France to meet with President Emmanuel Macron, Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan hosted members of the EuroNest Parliamentary Assembly as Yerevan holds the group's 12th plenary session. The Prime Minister highlighted Armenia's commitment to democratic reforms with EU support and underscored that the established peace with Azerbaijan has created a favorable atmosphere for continued dialogue. The European delegates welcomed the steps, expressing hope that the peace would contribute to regional stability and cooperation. However, the high-level talks on European values took place against a backdrop of local political tensions. Outside the National Assembly, demonstrators gathered to draw the delegates' attention to the recent arrest of opposition figures in Armenia. The session was also notable for who was not in attendance. The Azerbaijani delegation boycotted the event in protest of European institutions that have raised concerns about the rights of ethnic Armenians displaced from Nagorno-Karabakh. Georgia also refused to participate, sending an open letter accusing some European Parliament members of hostile rhetoric and inciting public disorder during protests in Tbilisi, thereby violating the principles of mutual respect. This dynamic left Armenia as the only country in the immediate region as the summit seemingly enjoyed warm and cooperative relations with the European Union, a situation described in local commentary as unprecedented.
Yerevan has become the center of European politics, with the 12th plenary session of the EuroNest Parliamentary Assembly underway. The Azerbaijani delegation refused to participate, stating that the European Parliament statements contradict Azerbaijan's sovereignty. The Speaker of the Georgian Parliament, in turn, called the session a farce, accusing the European Parliament of supporting the Georgian opposition. From the Commission's tribune, clear messages of support for Armenia were heard, as well as critical remarks.
What is happening today in the cities of Armenia? I am not here to judge. Police officers are arresting people. If they have been arrested for expressing an opinion on their social media pages, this is already becoming a method. Not a single person can be imprisoned for this in a democracy. For example, let's look at Istanbul. The Armenian authorities must be attentive to these issues if you aspire to be an EU candidate country.
European Parliament Vice President Yunus Omarjee, speaking on behalf of EP President Roberta Metsola, declared readiness to support Armenia on its path to EU membership.
An attack on one of us means an attack on all who believe in freedom and democracy. Armenia's decisions, especially those adopted recently, are extremely important. Armenia has adopted a historic law, sending a clear and powerful message, declaring that it sees its future as part of Europe. The European Parliament is ready to support Armenia on this historic path, should you decide to officially submit your candidacy for EU membership.
President of the National Assembly of Armenia, Alan Simonian, noted in his speech that although peace has already been established, unresolved humanitarian issues remain.
The adoption of the declaration and the pre-signing of the agreement signal that peace has already been established. Despite this, a number of unresolved humanitarian issues remain. The issue of individuals held in Azerbaijan, prisoners of war, is a serious problem that must find a solution. Another important humanitarian priority is clarifying the fate of numerous missing persons.
On the occasion of the presence of members of the European Parliament, a group of citizens gathered in front of the National Assembly to protest the existence and abundance of political prisoners in the country.
We stand here demanding your reaction and concrete actions. Please do not remain indifferent. Visit the people who are currently in Armenian prisons. We have more than 15 political prisoners.
European partners are called upon to pay attention not only to the authorities' statements, but also to the internal problems in the country, the existence of political prisoners, and the decline of democracy.
I am here so that there is one more person, so that European MPs see that one more person is standing here. Whether we are few or many, let our voice be heard. The first expectation from European partners, from European structures whose purpose is to guarantee human rights and oversee their condition, is not to falsify. Do not falsify the values of which you are a part. The inattention shown by European structures and officials towards our citizens is clearly directed.
Alan Simonian noted that Armenia continues its preparatory work to host two major international events in 2026, the European Political Community Summit and the UN Biodiversity Conference. Anna Harotunyan, ReOpen Media.
As Putin boasts about his new military toys, President Trump achieves a significant breakthrough with the leader of China. Watch that story in the second part of our broadcast. Putin claims new military victories while touting advanced new weapons. Armenia's ambassador to the U.S. explores new cultural ties at Museum of the Bible. Lavish ceremonies, a crucial meeting with Xi. Is Trump forging new peace in Asia? While the UK PM strikes a deal in Turkey, Armenia welcomes a new British ambassador. Let's shift the vector from Europe toward Russia. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has accused the West of attempting to sever ties between Moscow and its partners in the South Caucasus and Central Asia, vowing that Russia will use all possible means to thwart these efforts. The West is trying to cut off countries in the South Caucasus and Central Asia from the Federation, but Moscow will prevent such attempts by all possible means, Lavrov declared. The top Russian diplomat made the remarks following the third Minsk conference on Eurasian security.
НАТО, Евросоюз выстраивают свои собственные.
NATO and the European Union are building their own dialogue cooperation structures with the countries of Central Asia, the countries of the Trans-Caucasus, and the West is trying to use these ties not so much for mutually beneficial cooperation, but for the purpose of cutting these countries off from the Russian Federation. We will prevent such tendencies with all available means, diplomatic, political, economic. Russia will never agree for the goodwill of its allies and like-minded partners in Central Asia and the Trans-Caucasus to be used and abused and for them to be pushed towards confrontation with Russia, which is absolutely unnatural for their economic and political interests.
Another noteworthy statement came from Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexei Overchuk, who announced that Russian Railways is now resolving the logistics for transporting Russian goods to Armenia through Azerbaijani territory. The Azerbaijani side has confirmed that we have the opportunity to use the railway to transport Russian goods to Armenia, Overchuk said, calling it a very interesting shift. He added that Russian Railways is currently coordinating with regional partners to organize these shipments and that Russia's Ministry of Agriculture has been instructed to account for this new logistics route. The announcement follows a recent statement by Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev that his country had lifted all restrictions on the transit of goods to Armenia. And meanwhile, the war in Ukraine continues, prompting Russian President Vladimir Putin to boast about his new military toys. During a meeting with wounded soldiers, Putin claimed that Russian forces have encircled Ukrainian troops in the Kupiansk and Krasnoyarsk areas. In an unusual offer, he said that Russia's military is prepared to hold operations in these zones to allow access for media representatives. Putin stated his commanders would permit foreign and Ukrainian journalists into the encirclement zones to see with their own eyes what is happening there. Sergeant-in-Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov, Putin claimed that 31 Ukrainian battalions were trapped in the ring near Krasnoyarsk and Dmitrov. The Russian leader also announced that the new Sarmat missile system would soon be placed on combat duty. There is no other missile like the Sarmat in the world, Putin declared. He also revealed the recent successful test of the Poseidon nuclear-powered underwater drone, which he described as being even more powerful than the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile. Meanwhile, as the war continues, signs of shifting alliances are emerging within the European Union. According to a report by Politica, Hungary intends to form a bloc with the Czech Republic and Slovakia that would be skeptical toward Ukraine. An advisor to Prime Minister Viktor Orban revealed plans to coordinate positions with Czech ANO movement leader Andrej Babiš and Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico ahead of the EU's critical December summit. This strategy reflects Budapest's long-held policy of opposing weapons shipments to Kyiv and its resistance to sanctions on Russian energy supplies. And with that news about Armenia's ambassador, let's head across the ocean. On October 26 in New York, Armenia's ambassador to the U.S., Narek Mukherjee, attended a gala for the American University of Armenia AUA to launch its new master's program in journalism. The embassy underscored the event's clear message. Armenia needs highly trained, ethical journalists equipped with modern media tools to effectively amplify its voice on the international stage. In another significant outreach, Ambassador Mukherjee visited the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. He met with its director, Dr. Carlos Campo, to discuss potential avenues for cooperation, including the possibility of organizing a joint exhibition that would showcase Armenia's rich cultural and religious heritage. And now, keeping up with the U.S. President, during a visit to Japan, U.S. President Donald Trump hailed the close relationship between the two nations, but raised eyebrows by referring to their shared history in World War II as a small conflict. The comment came as Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi stood together on a U.S. aircraft carrier, where Trump embraced the Japanese leader, calling her a wonderful prime minister. On the surface, the primary goal of Trump's Road to Asian tour is economic, focused on securing new trade deals with Japan and other regional aims. However, these high-profile visits appeared to be a prelude to the most critical encounter of the trip. The two's real success hinges on his upcoming negotiations with the leader of China, which will likely determine whether the costly trade war between the two economic superpowers will continue or find a path toward resolution.
U.S. President Donald Trump has arrived in Tokyo, where he met with Emperor Naruhito and plans to meet with Japan's new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi on October 28th. The purpose of the visit is to promote trade deals, investments, and increase defense spending. Japan's first female Prime Minister, Takaichi, has promised to buy American trucks, soybeans, and gas to impress Trump. This is how Trump was greeted in Malaysia, where Donald Trump began his Asian tour. Before heading to Tokyo, Trump participated in the Asian Summit in Kuala Lumpur. He called Malaysia a wonderful and very vibrant country after attending the summit and signing a series of trade agreements. Here, he mediated a ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia. Trump played a key role in stopping the July border clashes, for which Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. Trump called the ceasefire saving millions of lives. Cambodia has begun a partial withdrawal of troops as a gesture of goodwill.
And I love doing it. It's like, I shouldn't say it's a hobby because it's so much more serious than a hobby, but it's something that I'm good at, and it's something I love to do. The United Nations should be doing this, but they don't do it.
In addition to meetings with ASEAN member countries, Trump also had a private conversation with Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva in Kuala Lumpur. Lula da Silva announced that discussions with Trump went well, and the U.S. president guaranteed that the two countries would reach a trade agreement. All this is happening against the backdrop of the U.S. imposing 50% tariffs on Brazilian goods in response to the former President Jair Bolsonaro's imprisonment.
Now Brazil is, we're going to make a deal. I think we'll make a deal with Brazil. We get along very well.
While Trump is holding diplomatic meetings, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced on the same day that it is ready to provide humanitarian assistance to the United States after the crash of two U.S. Navy aircraft in the South China Sea. The next and perhaps most challenging stop of the Asian tour will be Busan, South Korea, where Trump will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping on October 30. This meeting is considered one of the biggest challenges of Trump's second presidential term, as the world's two largest economies will try to prevent a further escalation of their trade war. In the preparatory phase of the negotiations, neither side expressed expectations of serious progress, focusing on managing disagreements and modest improvements. David Genjoyan, ReOpen Media.
As Donald Trump's tour through Asia finally brought him to South Korea, it was clear this was a journey that would be long remembered, marked by lavish receptions, displays of good neighborly relations, and plenty of smiles. In South Korea, he was greeted with full military honors by President Lee Jae-myung, gifted a replica of a historic golden crown, and awarded the country's highest state honor, the Grand Order of Mugunhwa, for his efforts to bring peace to the Korean peninsula. While in Seoul, Trump dismissed the recent North Korean cruise missile test, saying they have been launching rockets for decades. So what? He also floated and scrapped the idea of extending his stay for a meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, citing a very tight schedule. The full political digest from the visit in our report.
A lavish reception, a golden crown, and the highest state awards. At first glance, the U.S. president's visit to South Korea might seem like a warm, allied episode. However, behind the diplomatic scenes, the hottest economic and technological conflict of the 21st century is unfolding.
Tomorrow morning is the one that most people find most interesting, and I think we're going to have a great meeting with President Xi of China, and a lot of problems are going to be solved. Okay?
You're optimistic.
Yeah, very optimistic. I am, and I know a little bit about what's going on because we have been talking to them. We're not just walking into a meeting cold, but the relationship with China is very good. So I think we're going to have a very good outcome for our country and for the world.
With Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping in the leading roles. During his meeting with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, Trump received not only the country's highest honor, but also a replica of an ancient golden crown as a peacemaker. Trump seems to have re-entered the race for the Nobel Peace Prize. The U.S. president again recalled and even gestured how he reconciled the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan, even pronouncing the names of the countries correctly. But this time he made a mistake regarding the losses, mentioning millions of casualties.
Just take a look at that one. That was going on for, I think, 38 years, right? And President Putin called me and said, it's amazing. It's amazing. We couldn't get that war stopped. 38 years it went on. Millions of people killed, and we got it done. And the two countries came in, and they were in the White House, and they started off here, and they got closer, 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 closer. After an hour, they were hugging each other in peace. It was amazing, actually. It was beautiful to see two very good countries, two very good leaders.
If you look at Azerbaijan, the war was going on, I think, for 38 years, right? And President Putin called me and said, it's amazing that we couldn't stop that war. It went on for 38 years, millions of people died, and we got it done. And the two countries came to the White House and started to get closer and closer. After an hour, they were hugging each other in peace.
Trump's policies are destroying Korea's economy and eliminating jobs, and his approach is unilateral and coercive. We believe this undermines our national sovereignty, as these policies harm our economy and employment, so we oppose them.
Washington expects not symbolic, but real gold from Seoul. $350 billion in investments, which the Korean side has pledged to make, but is currently unable to agree on its structure and timing. Thus, even relations with an ally are built on the logic of economic pressure. Trump announced that he intends to discuss with Xi the sale of NVIDIA's cutting-edge Blackwell AI chips. These are not just microchips. They are the brains that power artificial intelligence, military technologies, in short, the economy of the future. It is believed that the U.S., by restricting their export to China, is trying to slow down the technological progress of its main competitor. China's main weapon is rare earth metals, these 17 chemical elements without which it is impossible to imagine the production of anything from smartphones to F-35 fighters, are almost entirely controlled by Beijing. By blocking their export, China can paralyze Western high-tech industries. This is Beijing's response to American tariffs and technological restrictions. On the other hand, the vulnerable point of the West, and particularly the U.S., and at the same time a restraining factor for China, is Taiwan's silicon shield. More than 90% of the world's most advanced microchips are produced in Taiwan. The global economy's dependence on these Taiwanese products is so great that a possible Chinese military campaign against the island would lead to a global economic collapse, from which China itself would also suffer. Thus, microchips have become not only an economic, but a military political deterrent. How does this global chess game affect the South Caucasus, and Armenia in particular? At first glance, indirectly. However, every step taken by superpowers eventually reaches everyone. Ani Hovhannisyan, ReOpen Media.
Capping a whirlwind tour of Asia, President Donald Trump has secured a landmark agreement with China's President Xi Jinping in what could be an epic breakthrough for the global economy. The deal abruptly ends the costly trade war between the two nations. Speaking to reporters, Trump rated the nearly 2-hour meeting a 12 out of 10. He announced the U.S. would immediately reduce tariffs on all Chinese goods. In return, China has committed to halting the export of fentanyl components, resuming purchases of American soy, and lifting export restrictions on rare earth metals. The rare earth issue is solved, and that's for the whole world, Trump declared. However, the magnificent meeting was framed by mixed signals. Just before the talks, Trump posted on social media about an immediate resumption of U.S. nuclear testing, directly naming China. And despite the glowing assessment, the leaders issued no joint statements, and the sensitive topic of Taiwan was reportedly not discussed.
U.S. President Donald Trump has rated his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping a 12 out of 10, signaling a significant breakthrough after nearly 2 hours of negotiations. Following the talks, the two leaders emerged, shook hands, and Trump whispered something in his Chinese counterpart's ear before personally escorting President Xi to his car. The meeting marked the conclusion of Donald Trump's Asian tour as he departed South Korea.
Okay, hello everybody. Mr. President. I thought it was an amazing meeting. He's a great leader of a very powerful, very strong country, China. And what can I say? We have, it was an outstanding group of decisions, I think, that was made. A lot of decisions were made, too. There wasn't too much left out there.
The positive outcomes and agreements on future visits were also confirmed by China's foreign ministry spokesperson.
The two leaders agreed to maintain regular contact. President Trump is looking forward to his visit to China early next year and has invited President Xi Jinping to visit the United States.
Even before the meeting, Trump had expressed optimism about reaching a truce in the trade war. President Xi also maintained a positive tone, noting that negotiators had reached a fundamental consensus, which set a good precedent for the meeting.
I'll be going to China in April, and he'll be coming here sometime after that, whether it's in Florida, Palm Beach, or Washington, D.C.
The talks, held at a South Korean airbase, were the first between the two leaders since 2019, with both sides expressing optimism about de-escalating trade tensions. President Xi noted that their economic teams had reached agreement on key issues, urging a joint effort to maintain the right course and ensure the giant ship of U.S.-China relations sails steadily.
Since the mid-2010s has been going up. It has its ups and downs. Right now, things seem to be on a somewhat positive track. Whether that will change in the near future, that's anybody's guess, right? But this is the pattern that we've seen in U.S.-China relations. They seem like they have an agreement, they seem like they have a framework agreement, and then one side or the other changes their mind, and we go back to more acrimony.
However, some analysts remain cautious, pointing to a volatile history in the relationship. These concerns were driven by the hardline positions both sides hold in their economic competition. The trade war recently flared up again when China threatened to restrict exports of rare earth metals crucial for technology. In response, Trump promised to impose 100% tariffs that could have damaged the global economy. David Genjoyan, ReOpen Media.
But as you know, Trump is no stranger to bold declarations. No more political correctness. Trump vows to win wars in a speech to troops. President Donald Trump has declared that the United States will no longer be politically correct in matters of national defense and intends to win future wars in a way the world has never seen before. Unlike past administrations, we will not be politically correct when it comes to the defense of the United States of America. We will defend our country by all necessary means, Trump told service members aboard the aircraft carrier USS George Washington at a U.S. naval base near Tokyo. From this day forward, when we win wars, we'll do it like no one has ever done before. Trump insisted that the U.S. armed forces are the most powerful in history and will soon become even more powerful. The president's hawkish rhetoric follows a significant change made by the White House in early September when it officially renamed the Department of Defense as the Department of War. And while Putin is busy boasting about his military toys, a different kind of deal is being hammered out in Turkey. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has flown to Turkey to meet with President Erdogan, and the topic of conversation is of course a fresh batch of Eurofighter jets. This is a rather crucial step for Turkey, which is looking to modernize its aging air force. You might recall that the US unceremoniously kicked Turkey out of the top-tier F-35 program after Ankara decided to buy S-400 missile systems from Russia. So, spurred by Washington, Turkey has turned to Europe. Germany, a key partner in the Eurofighter consortium, was initially opposed to the sale, citing Turkey's stance on the war in Gaza. But it seems those concerns have now been set aside, and Berlin has given its green light. My colleague has more on the details.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan have signed a widely reported defense agreement in Ankara, under which Turkey will acquire 20 Eurofighter Typhoon combat aircraft for £8 billion or 9 billion euros. This deal deepens strategic ties between NATO allies and significantly strengthens Turkey's air defense against the backdrop of its desire to maintain a balance with regional rivals, including Israel.
It is a landmark moment, reflecting the increasing depth and breadth of our existing cooperation and our ambition to go further. At the heart of this is our agreement today that the UK will provide Turkey with 20 new Eurofighter Typhoon aircraft, with the option to provide more in future.
The British Prime Minister's visit comes amidst warming relations between Ankara and its Western partners, as Turkey has sought for 3 decades to modernize its aging fleet of F-16s. This move is driven by the need to counter the strength of regional rivals, particularly the Israeli Air Force, which compels Turkey to seek immediate solutions. The acquisition of the 4.5 generation Eurofighter Typhoon fighter is precisely such an urgent solution. This deal aims to fill a strategic gap until Turkey's own technologically more advanced 5th-generation Kaan fighter, which is still under development, becomes operational.
We are determined to further strengthen our economic relations. Our respective institutions and organizations are taking numerous steps, including updating our free trade agreement. We are also exploring joint investment opportunities in third countries. We aim to establish new partnerships in the energy and defense industries.
While defense ties with a NATO ally were strengthening, tensions with another regional power were evident. On the same day in Budapest, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar announced that Israel would not accept the presence of Turkish armed forces in Gaza as part of any international peacekeeping mission, emphasizing the Erdogan government's hostile stance towards Israel.
Unfortunately, and mainly during the last 2 years, but even before that, Turkey led by Erdogan, led hostile approach against Israel, included not only hostile statements, but also diplomatic and economic measures against Israel. So it is not reasonable for us to let their armed forces enter to Gaza Strip, and we will not agree to that, and we said it to our American friends.
Back in 1998, the Turkish Armed Forces announced a 20-year arms modernization program worth $160 billion, with $45 billion allocated to the modernization of the Air Force, specifically updating the fleet of up to 200 F-16s and acquiring F-35s. After the acquisition of S-400 anti-aircraft missile systems from Russia, the United States canceled F-16 modernization deals with Turkey and has periodically suspended F-35 deliveries since 2019. Days ago, Donald Trump hinted that Washington might reconsider its position if Ankara abandons Russian weapons, and the issue was again shrouded in fog. According to experts, the deepening of Turkey's relations with its Western partners is taking place against the backdrop of new geopolitical developments and deepening contradictions in positions in the Middle East. David Genjoyan, ReOpen Media.
And while on the topic of the United Kingdom, let's turn our attention back to Armenia, which has welcomed the UK's new top diplomat. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan received the newly appointed ambassador of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland to Armenia, Her Excellency Alexandra Pamela Kaul. The Prime Minister congratulated the ambassador on her appointment and wished her success in the consistent development of relations between Armenia and the United Kingdom. Their conversation covered the promotion of trade and economic ties, advancing democratic reforms, and deepening cooperation in other areas. Notably, both sides emphasized the importance of elevating bilateral relations from the level of strategic dialogue to a strategic partnership. The new ambassador's diplomatic engagements continued at the National Assembly, where she was received separately by Speaker Alen Simonyan and Deputy Speaker Ruben Rubinian on October 29. In both meetings, Armenian officials expressed hope that the ambassadors tenure would significantly contribute to strengthening the multifaceted relationship. Across all meetings, discussions consistently touched upon the established peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the steps toward unblocking regional communication routes, and the further development of bilateral and inter-parliamentary ties. If you had all the money in the world, what would you chase? Well, Elon Musk has some new demands and he is expected to react brashly if they aren't met. Tesla CEO Elon Musk could resign if shareholders do not approve a new pay package worth up to $1 trillion over 10 years, according to the company's chair, Robin Denholm. The entrepreneur has threatened to walk away from the company if shareholders don't approve the nearly $1 trillion payment. Tesla shareholders have been asked to vote on Musk's massive compensation package by November 5. Denholm told CNBC that she considers Musk irreplaceable in his position. Musk's leadership is key to Tesla's success, Denholm noted. She added that if the bonus package is not approved, the company could lose his talent and vision at a time when Tesla is striving to become a global leader in artificial intelligence and autonomous driving technologies. Want to read a love story? You could just watch one. It might feel like a déjà vu, but Titanic is the perfect choice for today because on this day, November 1st, 1997, James Cameron's masterpiece had its world premiere at the Tokyo International Film Festival. But before it sailed into history, Titanic was the film everyone expected to sink. Plagued by delays and a budget spiraling out of control, Hollywood had already written its obituary. From that first screening, however, something unpredictable happened. It just didn't have a big opening. It became a global phenomenon. It launched DiCaprio and Kate Winslet into the stratosphere of superstardom, unleashing Leo mania across the globe. The accolades followed a record-tying 11 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and it left us with a cultural legacy. The cry of "I'm the king of the world," the unforgettable image of Jack and Rose at the ship's bow, and the renewed obsession with the real history of the doomed liner. This much for today. I'm Sona Tumanyan. Stay informed with ReNews. Good night.